it's me, Mick, your host with the most. Don't make me prove it. Yes, welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You are watching me, Mick, here on my YouTube channel, Movies TV Mad. You can also follow me on X at Movies TV Mad, on Instagram, Movies TV Mad X. I think I owe you guys a DC video. It's not like I don't want to talk about DC, but I don't want to be, talking about something that's not happening, or, I want this channel to talk about DC. I'm a huge DC fan, but I also want to talk about other stuff. I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. I've been talking a lot about Doctor Who because it's on the air at the moment, and we've got, it's a huge moment in Doctor Who history as well. And I will be reviewing The Giggle after it's aired. You should see that on Monday. But we have some very interesting developments in terms of the air cut. For new subscribers and new viewers out there, what is the air cut? It's the nickname of the actual original cut of the 2016 Suicide Squad movie, written and directed by David Ayer. Because in the original DC Extended Universe, Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, Suicide Squad, Justice League, there was a lot of studio interference, and unfortunately David's movie was one of the victims of this interference. So they didn't like David's movie, so they decided to stick a bunch of radio music on it. Now originally David had a composer do a brilliant score. He reckons it's a brilliant score. I believe him. So anyway, he claims on X or Twitter or whatever we're calling it today that the air cut is coming. And if David Ayer says the air cut's coming, who am I not to believe him? He's got no reason not to be telling us the truth. But it's a bit too good to be true, isn't it? I'm kind of pinching myself. Is this a dream? Will I wake up and find myself, in Kansas? Well, I've never been in Kansas anyway. But yeah, it does seem a bit too good to be true. But it does seem we will be getting the air cut, and David's claims we're going to be hearing something very surprising very, very soon. So that's exciting. But how will we be able to see the air cut? Because if it's on HBO Max, I won't be able to see it. If it's on Netflix, I will be able to see it. So it's going to be very interesting what Zaslav and WB do here and how we're able to see it. My perfect scenario would be that I can buy it on digital or physical media, but Netflix is available nearly in every country around the world. It's the only streaming service that really is. The other ones are really difficult to get here in Cyprus. So I've always wanted to see this version of this film because something very interesting has been happening since DC Extended Universe movies have been available in most countries on Netflix. It seems the 2016 Suicide Squad, the cut, the interfered one that was edited by a pop video company, has become very popular on Netflix. Many people saying that they liked it. Now, is this all true? Are these just bots working for the studio saying, well, do you know what? It was all right anyway. We don't need a director's cut. Maybe that's part of it. My opinion always was that actually 2016 Suicide Squad movie was very, very good. And I've always preferred it to James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, even though I like James Gunn's movie. One of the most unique things about David Ayer's Suicide Squad, even though he's saying it's not really his movie, but he did direct that movie. That is a movie directed by him, but not edited by him. It was taken away. And the editing of a movie is one of the most important elements of a movie. It sets the standard of the narrative and what way a movie is going to go. So we should never underestimate, how important who and what and why edits a movie. But anyway, I always liked that movie. I liked the characterizations. Will Smith's Deadshot is outstanding. Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn is the most accurate depiction in live action of Harley Quinn we've had thus far. Unfortunately, since then, Margot's Harley has become a bad impression of herself. And I'm expecting an even deeper, raw version of Harley Quinn when we get to see the Ayer cut. Captain Boomerang by Jay Courtney, absolutely outstanding. I didn't even think, prior to this film, I didn't even think Jay was a very, very good actor. I didn't see much personality or caricatures in his performances in the past. But in this film, he's so good. And one of the worst things that James Gunn has ever done in his career ever was to kill off that character. You've got Rick Flag, absolutely fantastic. Obviously, this was the first place we saw Amanda Waller as well. Absolutely brilliant. You wouldn't want another actor playing that character now, and it won't be the case. But this, the castings in this movie are fantastic. And I do believe it's the better Suicide Squad movie. Why? I think there's more depth in this movie than there is in James's movie, if I'm going to be honest. There is depth in James's movie, but James looks at things differently. And another thing I always loved about the 2016 movie, it kind of solidifies the DC Extended Universe, the Snyderverse, as a living, breathing, connected universe. The very first thing we see in that movie is Amanda Waller, saying that brilliant emotional thing that she says. Superman changed the world when he flew across the sky. He changed it again when he didn't. I think that's a very compelling line from David Ayer, and I think it really works to say Superman is dead, that Batman versus Superman is part of our universe, and we're continuing that story. In fact, the narrative of Amanda Waller, wanting to form a Suicide Squad team is because there's no Superman anymore. And maybe the next Superman may not be on the American government side. So these are all very, very interesting things going on in this movie. But you've also got brilliant cameos. Ezra Miller's The Flash cameo, brilliant, to solidify that, that character as part of this universe, and that a Justice League is coming. Because we knew at the time a Justice League movie was coming. And that was very, very exciting for DC fans, because we'd never seen a live action Justice League movie before. So the hype was real. But the highlight of the cameos, of course, was Ben Affleck as Bruce Wayne and Batman. That bit in the alleyway between Batman and Deadshot, I need to say Deathstroke, but Deadshot, brilliant, emotional, compelling, it works. And we see him again chasing Harley and the Joker, again, brilliant. And then that post-credit scene between Viola Davis and Ben Affleck was fire. I think it was a very good movie, considering it was cut to pieces from the original kind of vision from David Ayer. And I do expect the Ayer cut to be a lot better, a lot more compelling. I don't think there's that many... I don't think it's about the extra footage. I think it's the way it's edited. It's about the narrative. I think there's about 10-20 minutes of extra footage, if I remember what David said rightly. Look, David Ayer is a really good writer-director. He's made a lot of good films. It was amazing of Zack Snyder to bring him on, and that shows the faith that Zack Snyder had in David Ayer. One of the things I love about the Snyderverse, that it was a filmmaker's universe, because the MCU isn't an artist's filmmaker's universe, and that's the differences there. And that's what I liked about the DCEU, that someone like Christopher Nolan put this together, brought in Zack Snyder, and allowed him to bring people in like David Ayer. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing the Ayer cut. Some people say, let it go, it's in the past. No, don't mess around with artistic visions. That's what the DCEU was supposed to be. In a way, it's like the Dark Knight trilogy. They never messed with that. And let's not forget, Batman Begins made around 300, 400 million. It didn't make a lot of money, but let's not forget that film barely cost 100 million to make. So it still made a profit, but people were still remembering Batman and Robin. It was like me. I didn't want to see Batman Begins at first because of Batman and Robin. I was tired of Batman adaptations at that point. But then I saw the red carpet premiere on television, and they were showing lots of clips, and I said, hang on a minute. This looks very, very different. And, if you ask me my joint top two Batman movies, it's definitely Batman Begins and Batman Returns. Two very different movies. Batman Returns is very, gothic and fantastical, but Batman Begins is very it's got this gritty realism to it. So I like both edges of the spectrum. That's why I'm kind of intrigued by, Brave and the Bold. I think that's going to be a fantastical Batman movie. And I think really Batman fans could do with a fantastical Batman movie. Again, we've had so many gritty, kind of realistic takes of Batman and darker takes of Batman. Maybe it's about time to go a bit more fantastical. But yeah, I think this is going to be very, very exciting. But it is interesting to me with the DCEU now, most of those movies being on Netflix and people talking about the DCEU again. Because the DCEU is a contradiction in terms. You've got the Snyderverse. Then you've got the other movies after Snyder left. And in my opinion, it goes like this. The first Aquaman, I really, really enjoyed that. Shazam wasn't really made for me. It was made for families and kids. I thought it was okay, but I didn't really get much out of it. Like Wonder Woman 84, I didn't really enjoy that film. I didn't really enjoy any of the other films after Aquaman, apart from Black Adam. You can like bad movies, and I don't think Black Adam is a bad movie, but at the end of the day, I love the score, I love the movie, and I think The Rock really tried to make a great movie. Bringing in people like Pierce Brosnan was exceptional. I mean, I don't like the end battle that much, but it's a good movie. But, and Zack Snyder's very ruthless when he talks about the DCEU. He says, my 3 movies have nothing to do with the rest of those movies, and he puts it very politely. But he doesn't want to be connected to the other shit, because it's against everything that Snyder stands for, of course. And, in a way, that 2016 movie that was hacked to pieces is more connected to the Snyderverse, because it is connected to the Snyderverse. It continues from BVS. Now, maybe Zach and David wouldn't like me saying that, but I do kind of look at that as a kind of Snyderverse movie. And even though they kind of messed around with Wonder Woman as well, 2017, it's a great movie. And again, for me, that's part of the Snyderverse. Snyder had a lot to do with Wonder Woman 2017. I always believed that he ghost directed most of it. And Patty Jenkins was just there because she was a woman, and they think that women can only write and direct, female-led projects, which is pathetic, of course. I mean, we've had some of the best female leads have been written and directed by men. Let's just talk about, briefly, Terminator 2 Judgment Day. I mean, James Cameron wrote that movie. And I mean, the same character, the same female character in the first movie as well. So, because the way it is for me, you don't have to be a woman to understand a woman. You don't have to be gay to write gay characters. I don't believe that's the case. I mean, nobody knows what it's like to be gay or trans or a woman or a man. But the thing is, we're all individuals as well. I think if you're around certain communities, you can kind of negate a character like that. But anyway, Hollywood's gone a bit mad, so we know that today. But yeah, so I think it's very, very interesting when we talk about the Ayer cut, because it really is connected to the Snyder cut. And it really was, because what we had was Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, then we were going to have Zack's Justice League. And at least a second one. There was never going to be a third one, but Zack wanted, 3 Justice League movies. But there was definitely a plan for Justice League and Justice League 2 because it was on the slate. But there was never a Justice League 3 on the slate, but Zack always talks about 3 Justice League movies. And it was very interesting last week as we talk about Zack coming out and saying he's done with DC and he's focusing on his Netflix projects. And I spoke to you about this last week, saying, well, of course he's going to say that. They're encouraging him to say that at Netflix. And also, he is done with DC because nobody's offering him the opportunity to come back at DC. But then, Stuber at Netflix said they would love him to do DC projects at Netflix because they want as much Zack as possible. But they said we don't own DC, and that's very unlikely as well. So they were kind of, hedging their bets. But there's no question that I think Zach and Stuber at Netflix have discussed, finishing off Snyderverse at Netflix. I don't know if that's possible. But as long as the dream's there, the dream's there. No one should shoot down any dreams for you and any hopes if that's what you want. But I think the realistic situation is, and it's not a good one for James Gunn, because the problem is Warner Brothers is a company in disarray and in debt, like Disney. So they're going to sell off anything they can. And as I say, it wouldn't surprise me if the haircut lands at Netflix as well, which will do me a lot of favours as someone who can't get a lot of American streaming services here in Cyprus. So fingers crossed about that, because I want to see it. It's like Rebel Moon. I could just sit back here in my room, shove my telly on, and watch it. And that's very, very exciting for me, because I get to watch it with my surround sound, in the privacy of my own home as well. Not that I don't enjoy going to the movie theatre, but it's just nice to be able to watch a brand new movie at home on your own as well. But I do enjoy the environment of watching films with other people. So I'm very, very excited that looks like, I know that David said we're getting it, but it's still kind of, as I say, too good to be true. Unbelievable. But, James Gunn promised he would help him get it, and it looks like that James has kept his word. But I'll go back to the pressure that James Gunn's under now. Because if people are looking at the theatrical cut of Suicide Squad 2016 as a good movie as they re-watch it, or watch it on Netflix for the first time, that's not a good place for James Gunn to be. Firstly, he made his own Suicide Squad movie, which creates an interesting thing. That film was not successful. It was released during the COVID pandemic, so we'll never know if people rejected that film because they weren't interested in James Gunn's Suicide Squad, or because the COVID pandemic scared people from going to theatres at the time. But the record shows it failed in the theatre. And it was day and date as well, which didn't help it. But the record will say that movie did well on HBO Max, but didn't do well in movie theatres. And if you remember James Gunn's reaction, it was, well, I'm going to focus on doing streaming stuff from now on. It was like an admittance that maybe cinema wasn't for him anymore. Now there's been a huge turnaround. Now he's making Superman Legacy, writing and directing a Superman movie. That will be released in theatres. So he changed his mind very, very quickly. That's why you can't trust anything these people say. But the haircut does add pressure to James Gunn, because people are going to start remembering the Snyderverse and the DCEU when and if this movie is released. And according to David, this movie is going to be released. And no matter how many times they say to fans, leave James Gunn alone and all of that, people are going to watch this movie and think, wow, what might have been. Because it is very sad, if you like the Snyderverse, if you like, the Snyder portion of the DCEU, to think, wow, this was a filmmaker, artistic-centric franchise, and people rejected that. Imagine that. They wanted the DCEU to be more like Marvel, which was the total opposite of a filmmaker's franchise. Have we stooped so low now as consumers and an audience that we reject artistic integrity and a filmmaker's vision for Marvel, for a Marvel type of stylized franchises? Now this is interesting with DC Universe as well, because when Superman Legacy arrives, will people go to cinemas and gobble it up? Or will they be, because there's no question about it, Superman Legacy is going to be heavily compared to Man of Steel. And that's going to be interesting, my friends, because Man of Steel has aged like a fine wine. Batman vs. Superman has aged like a fine wine. People are going back on Netflix watching 2016's, let's call it the Jeff Johns cut, if you like, of the Suicide 2016 movie, saying it was actually quite a good movie. And they enjoyed it. As I say, this does add kind of pressure to James Gunn. But Zaslav is going to be doing things like this, like putting all these DC movies on Netflix so they can, because they need the money. But this does add pressure to James Gunn, because James Gunn really has to deliver. And briefly, we should talk about, opposed and compared to Man of Steel, what type of Superman movie is Superman Legacy going to be? And I mean, I've got different stances on this, and we've spoken about this several times, but how do you go at Superman? How do you make him relatable? So many people have tried, and it's still only Dick Donner who's made him relatable to a mainstream audience. Man of Steel was relatable to a cult audience. Batman vs Superman was relatable to a cult audience. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm not saying that Man of Steel was a bad movie, but it didn't appeal to the masses as Superman the movie did. And Superman Legacy can't be for a cult audience. That's not what Zaslav wants. He wants to make loads of money, and he wants it to appeal to a wide-ranging audience. And, how is Gunn going to do that? Because he's already mentioned that he's going to look at Superman as a very kind character in an era where people see kindness as a weakness. And he's going to play on that. That could make Superman really relatable. There's going to be a lot of cameos in this. Maybe that's how you divert from Superman not being as relatable. I do feel bad for James Gunn because he has been saddled with a character that people have struggled to relate to. And I love Superman. Superman is my most favourite character in comics, in fiction. I grew up with Superman. Superman the movie was the first film I ever saw. So, I've always related to Superman. I related to him because he's the ultimate immigrant. My parents were immigrants. I was racially abused at school. I know all about not fitting in. I love this character because he could fly, because he had powers. I didn't mind him being too powerful. I liked that because as a kid, I had no power and I felt powerless. So it was good to see the ultimate immigrant have the ultimate power. I love that. He's my character. I don't need anyone to make him relatable to me. He was relatable to me in Superman the movie, in Superman 2, Superman 3, Superman 4 in a lesser extent. Superman Returns, Man of Steel, BVS, the Snyder Cut, but especially Smallville. And I think it is Smallville. I think it is Alan Miles who developed and created Smallville, and Dick Donner with Superman the movie. They're the two times in live action where Clark Kent or Superman appealed to the masses. So this is what James has to do, But the comparison of Man of Steel is going to be there. A Man of Steel will be haunting James Gunn. There's no question about it. The fact that everybody believes it was James Gunn who decided not to continue with Henry Cavill when Henry Cavill was never going to continue as Superman. They lied to you. Henry lied to you. Zaslav lied to you. Warner Brothers lied to you just so you could go and watch Black Adam because they knew it was going to fail at the global and domestic box office. That whole thing was a lie. No, James Gunn never wanted to go with Henry Cavill, but I'm wondering if James Gunn ever had a choice in the matter and always had to cast a new man anyway. But I think James always wanted to go with his own man, and that's understandable, but it wasn't handled very well. In desperation, they lied to us that Henry was coming back. The truth was that Henry was never coming back, and they've created a worse situation for themselves now. And we'll have to wait and see if James Gunn can pull this off. Because as I said last week, if James Gunn cannot pull this off, then DC Comics is going to be sold to Netflix, to Universal, to anyone. It could be sold to anyone. And of course, Disney would be interested in that. The problem is Disney are a company in disarray. DC Comics being sold to Disney would be the last thing I'd want. They'd want it because they could do Marvel crossovers. It would be huge for them. But they are, unfortunately, that company. And I don't really want Disney getting their hands on DC. But I'd be more than happy with Netflix getting their hands on DC because of Zack Snyder. But these are all if buts and maybes. We don't know. Superman Legacy could be a huge hit. Then James can go to work on the rest of his DC universe. But right now you can toss a coin. Nobody knows. It could be successful. There's as much chance of it being successful as it is unsuccessful. And we're going to have to wait and see on that. So at the end of the day, people can make their predictions. They can wish for failure. They can wish for success. All I see right now is the usual DC kind of hardcore fans and shills really getting excited for Superman Legacy. But I'm excited for Superman Legacy. I want it to be good. I want, 51 years old, this could be the last opportunity for me to see a fresh take of Superman. And I don't want it to fail because of other loyalties that I have. And that's where I am at. But at the very least, because DC fans don't win very often, but getting the haircut is a win for every DC fan, even if you think you don't want it. Because what shouldn't be happening is that a director's vision is hacked to death by a pop video editing company. That's not right. No matter what you think of Snyder and Ayer and all of that, that isn't right. That's wrong. And it's not something that was just taken away from them. It was taken away from us as well. Imagine if George Lucas's Star Wars: A New Hope got the same treatment, because they didn't trust George at the time. They thought it was going to bomb. Nobody even thought this was going to be a good movie. And it was successful because there was a guy there that had faith in George Lucas. But it could have gone the other way. They could have interfered with that film, but old Hollywood didn't do that so much. I mean, studios were little interferers. They were nervous purposes, and they always have been. I mean, you can't blame WB for being so nervous at the time. But they brought in Nolan brought in Snyder. They could have said to Nolan, no, Chris, this is not the way we want to go. We feel that Zack can't attract the general audience. But they allowed it to happen. And it's as Snyder said in that interview the other day, if you wanted a sweet, colourful, mainstream superhero franchise, you brought in the wrong man. Exactly, Zack. Exactly, Zack. They brought in the wrong man for what they wanted to do. Zack Snyder can only be Zack Snyder. He can't be Kevin Feige. And, Warner Brothers could have made different decisions. They didn't. They wanted mainstream MCU money. By having Snyder there, what happened was Snyder was shaving against the grain, because that's what Snyder does. He was making the movies that he wanted to make. Personally, I'm so happy that Snyder's DCEU is getting a lot more appreciation. I'm happy it exists. But there was a lot of damage, done to DC as well. And, I just want to see the haircut. I want to see what type of film it is. And it's going to be interesting how different it is. Because David Ayer has always said that his film is extremely very different. So I'm going to hold him to his word. Now, Zack Snyder promised us that his film, the Snyder Cut, would be a hell of a lot different to Justice League. And he was right. I mean, pretty much the same plot, but a very different film. Differently edited, longer, so much hidden footage we never saw. Now, obviously, there's not as much hidden footage of the haircut, but it's certainly, as we've been promised from David, a very, very different movie. I want to know in the comments down below if you want to see the haircut, if you're planning on seeing the haircut when it's out, or if you're not interested. But it is an interesting situation for James Gunn, because people are going to be looking at that film and saying, look at what we could have had. And that isn't easy for James Gunn. Now, James Gunn's got to allow his work to speak for itself. Thus far, he's made some very, very good comic book stuff. But let's not get it twisted. The DC fandom is split. And general audiences who are not really into DC or Marvel are they have had enough of comic book movies. There's no question there is a superhero fatigue. There wasn't when they were saying there was all those years ago, but there is now. When people think about superhero movies, they do go, oh God, not again. I think that is the attitude, everyone. Not from me, not from you. We still get excited about it, but we're not the ones that can bring the money that these studios want. What do I think the future of comic book films and television is? That we don't get as much, we still get it. Superhero live action will always be there. But 4 or 5 movies from Marvel and DC isn't in the future. Even Gunn said that they're not going to be doing that much. But for example, next year is a big win for DC fans. We've got The Penguin, series on HBO Max. That's going to be brilliant, I have no doubt. You know, we have Joker, Folly and Do. This is the type of DC things and stuff that I want to see. And I think next year is actually quite kind of a very exciting year to be a DC fan.